extraterrestrial intervention occurred on Earth in the distant past. That is, if it really is an artificial structure. Boston, Massachusetts, February.
Tell me some more!
Aerospace engineer and satellite imaging expert Mark Carlotta has spent countless hours examining the Badlands Guardian to see if he can determine for certain whether it is something other than a natural formation.
The image of the Badlands Guardian is very striking as this Native American figure, and so this using some imaging software the feature. So we'll start with the Badlands Guardian. You can see the figure in the middle of the very similar in morphology. So now what we'll do is we'll zoom up on the figure. You can see a little more clearly the face. So what can we do to bring out some information? Well, we ran a program that extracts the height or elevation from the figure, and the way it's depicted here is dark is low and bright is high. So now, after we've taken the image and texture mapped it onto the elevation surface, we can view it in 3D. And now I'm moving around it and viewing it like we might see it on a drone. And as you can see, when you're looking straight down on the Badlands Guardian, it's common resemblance to Native American. But as we look at the top angle, as we look at it from simulated ground level, you see the illusion disappears. So clearly this creature that was created was meant to be viewed from above.
One important factor for Mark is how a formation looks when the lighting changes. If the Badlands Guardian still appears as a face under different conditions, it could strengthen the argument that it's an artificial structure.
And as you can see, what we've simulated here in these views are noontime views, so the sun isn't noon in the summer, the spring or fall, and the winter. Notice in the winter the shadows are longer, the sun is low in the sky. And in all three, we definitely get this impression of the face. It implies it's very interesting, and if it's not artificially created, nature is having a great joke on us.
To me, the Badlands Guardian looks artificial. It doesn't look like a trick of nature and something from schizophrenia. All humans do have schizophrenia, meaning they see patterns where patterns are not. That's why we see Mickey Mouse in the clouds and so on. But this looks too specifically like some type of native person with a headdress on. Looking at this picture, you can see the natural patterns of erosion. So it's clear to me from this picture that this is an artificial structure. Did a grandmother in Saskatchewan accidentally discover physical evidence of extraterrestrial intervention on Earth? But if so, how long has it been there? Who built it? And what does it mean? Perhaps further clues can be found by examining other geoglyphs that have been discovered all over the world. And the strange figures they depict. Mathematician and physicist Carl Friedrich Gauss. He probably said at once again that there are other intelligent beings in our solar system. He hypothesized that alien life forms might be able to view the surface of our planet through the use of superior technology, and implied that we could attempt to communicate with them by creating large-scale shapes and figures in the earth. What are known today as geoglyphs.
Gauss's idea was simple, that subtraction force get planted in the shape of right triangles, so that at great distances, patterns of triangles will be visible from space.
He tried to come up with an idea to count with the signal and this
Yo, fucking weak!
the signal that could tell him that we were in front of him. So what he devised was to create this huge geograph in Siberia showing the Pythagorean triangle.
看不到咩？
This is something that we
我
can
下
only
来是鸡巴看不到 ，Keep the fuck left！
So he confined this model to these intelligence outside of
标英雄必争者，真的。
more than a century after Gauss proposed creating figures in the Earth to communicate with extraterrestrials, pilots flying over southern Peru in the 1930s discovered hundreds of giant geoglyphs etched into the desert soil. The Nazca Lines. And there is no record of when or why the Nazca Lines were formed, or even
很牛哦，真的，很牛哦，
purposely signed.
很难呢，
But the accused
70都不到，几百。
were doing exactly
不
what
要讲70啊，最多走40哎，真的。不可以 ，fuck off，don't try，快嘞，真的很难呢。 It wasn't until the invention of the airplane that we were able to observe the mastermind from the vantage point they were designed for. With the ability to see the Earth from new heights, more and more I can see
geographic
more than 100 meters away，开什么懒觉黑色在？真的。
created similar formations all over the world. Geoglyphs up to south of Ohio. In England, Glastonbury, we have the Glastonbury Zone.
喂，
Carved into the landscape. You'll
Directly at the sky, but the abandoned garden is incredible. Just his head. With the native American face and the native American live in the area. Native American is still the stories of people who live maybe a signal, hey, this is us to give and you say hello. Is it possible that you know what human ideas and also what happens inside illustrating the whole concept of industrial visitors? That boasts the greatest concentration of rock art on the North American Great Plains. Riding on stone for Vigil, Canada. Here, less than 100 miles away from the Canadian province, is an incredible list of local Native American traditions. Villages come from the sky to their every aspect of life that what people lived here centuries ago. There are ancient calendars, depictions of animals, humans, in time of the races, and the book of God, where the worship the sky beings. In various Native American traditions, we have different spiritual beings located on these sort of different kinds of existence. There's a wonderful array of stories in many Native Americans that help us to the interest and interactions with these people with these humans. For the most common belief is the one with their creation. Nothing. The creator beneath the Blackfoot is called Mucky, and this excavation can be seen that appears to be inside of a disc. And it's very strange looking because it's got 4 hands, it's got 7 millimeter fingers. The Blackfoot tells a really interesting creation of the Mucky life. They tell how he came to Earth, created various animals and other creatures, and then one day he decided to form a living human being out of clay. And then he goes and lives in the Blackfoot below.
SLA 51757. From the left, you don't want to car on the left. Mother never fucked up rate from 5. Oh my god. 660cc van overtaking you. Fucking useless. Stop riding, please.
is a figure who was in communication with otherworldly beings, maybe even the star people.
If extraterrestrials communicated with the ancient Blackfoot Indians, is it possible that they imparted the knowledge and technology to construct the Badlands Guardian? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that not only did extraterrestrials visit people living in the Alberta Badlands in the distant past, but that they continue to visit the region to this very day.
Certain areas of the world are hotbeds of UFO activity. And in fact, Alberta, Canada, is one of these hotbeds. There's constantly UFO sightings in the day and night, and there's quite a few photos and films that can be seen. In 2009 alone, there were over 150 reported sightings of UFOs in Alberta. One of the most famous UFO sightings in that area happened in 1967 when a person named Warren Smith and two of his friends were out walking in this area, and in broad daylight they then saw a silvery disc-shaped UFO hovering around the trees. The witnesses took their photos, and then finally the UFO vanished.
Warren Smith's photos of this craft as it was lifting in the sky were analyzed by the Photo Interpretation Center. The experts there determined that the photos were real and that it matched the description of what he said he saw, suggesting that this was a genuine experience and that these were in fact genuine photos of the craft. The area where Warren Smith took the photos isn't far from where the Badlands Guardian is located. Does this suggest that aliens have a continuing interest in this area?
With all of this UFO activity in Alberta, and it's in the vicinity of the Badlands Guardian, you have to wonder if this area isn't some portal or interdimensional spot where UFOs are coming and going. And you have to wonder if it's something to do with the Badlands Guardian.
Does the Badlands Guardian represent a medicine man who communicated with the star people? Or could it be depicting a star being, one who taught the indigenous people of the region a means of communicating with extraterrestrials? Ancient astronaut theorists believe the answer can be found only by forensically examining the Badlands Guardian and taking a closer look at the shape of the figure's head. Los Angeles, California, February 2019. Ancient astronaut theorist Giorgio Tsoukalos is meeting up with forensic 3D artist Marcia Moore.
Marcia, pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Come on in.
Okay. Wow, look at this space.
Since learning about the Badlands Guardian, Marcia has been working to reconstruct it digitally to see what it would look like as a three-dimensional head, and perhaps provide further clues as to who or what it was modeled after.
Hold chair.
Great.
And we'll discuss this guardian.
So you've taken this, and clearly you've seen the face, and decided to recreate the face.
Absolutely.
Okay, and what did you come up with?
Well, the first step for me is to just take a look at the terrain. I think honestly, from the area view, when you look at it, there's a whole story going on here. But we're focusing on this face because this is very common. So you can tell we've got the neck area that's very extended, some heavy, and also this elongation forming around this temples. From there, I created a 3D pencil to remove this area.
think it's really cool that you've kind of pointed out the elongation of the skull. This whole phenomenon of elongated skulls exists worldwide. Not only do we have these shapes in this geographic area, but also, for example, in South America, in Peru, but also in Europe, in the Hittite region, present-day Turkey, all with these long skulls.
Around the world, ancient skulls have been found that are thin, long, and misshapen. In addition to the skulls, there are many ancient depictions of historical figures with extra-large, elongated heads.
What's controversial about the elongated skulls is that their cranial capacity is greater than a normal human. So these may not be cases of cranial deformation. These could be examples of a whole subspecies of humanity.
Worldwide, we have these people in depictions wearing these long headdresses, and sometimes you even see pictures, especially in ancient Egypt, where you see the same figures without the headdress, and guess what? They have elongated skulls.
So you have to ask yourself, why is there a figure coming out of the terrain that has, to me, seems like an elongated shape?
The idea is that Earth was visible by extraterrestrials a long time ago. And one of my opinions is that the elongated skull people were the actual visitors. The skeletons that are found today are some of the few remnants of the people that were here a long time ago. Clearly, they look like us, except for that they have elongated skull. So that to me is fascinating. Nasir, thank you so much for sharing your work with me. You've given me a lot to think about, so thank you.
Thank you.
Does the three-dimensional reconstruction of the Badlands Guardian point to the possibility that it was not only built to be seen by visitors from the sky, but that it may even be a representation of an extraterrestrial? Could this be the face of the being the Blackfoot people identify as their creator god, Nabi? Perhaps the answers can be found by examining yet another geoglyph that resembles a human face on Mars. July 19, 1976. A NASA spacecraft named Viking 1 enters into orbit above Mars. Just 6 days later, it takes a photograph of the red planet that is so extraordinary, it immediately seizes the public imagination.
In the summer of 1976, NASA announced that they had found a face on Mars. Now, NASA was the original group of scientists to label the face on Mars a head. It was actually in their file. And they said that they had found this formation on Mars that looked like a face. However, just a few days later, they had a second press conference, and they said that they had taken a second image days later, and they found that it was just a trick of light and shadow, and there was nothing there.
Could it be that the image of a giant face on the Martian surface is actually an artificial structure? A physical record that someone or something has been there? Perhaps a clue can be found by comparing the face on Mars with the Badlands Guardian.
So the face is about a mile wide and about a mile and 2/3 long. So the face on Mars is larger than the Badlands Guardian, but Badlands Guardian is large enough that you can still see it in satellite imagery.
To determine if the face was created by natural means, imaging expert Mark Carlano conducted a scientific analysis of the Martian structure.
All right, so in this overview, we see the face on Mars in the middle. One of the tests that was done on the face of Mars was to assess whether it was an artificial or a natural object. We applied a technique called fractal analysis to model the background terrain locally. We have a filter that basically computes a little fractal model as it moves over the image. And we see, if we go back and forth here to the original image, the output of the fractal model, fractal filter, the face has a very high response. And this was a very unexpected result at the time. The fractal technique found that it doesn't really look like a face, but it actually is statistically, in terms of the structure, different from the surrounding image. cynicism of this formation is that in more recent images, the impression of the face is much less evident. The structure appears much more highly eroded. But if it is an ancient feature, you would expect erosion would have taken its toll over the course of time. If we flip it back and forth, there's a very high degree of correspondence between the left and the right side, making it a highly bisymmetrical object. Bisymmetry would imply an artificial construction, because nature would have to conspire quite a bit to create something that's not only face-like but bisymmetrical and possessing all the detail that the face on Mars possesses. The other interesting thing about the face on Mars is that NASA has taken, over the last 25-30 years, over 40 images of the face on Mars, a formation that they say they have no interest in.
If the face on Mars is, in fact, a fabricated structure, who built it? Does it have a connection to the giant face recently discovered in Canada? And perhaps other structures around the globe that were made to be seen from the sky? Curiously, many who have examined the face on Mars have observed that the area surrounding it seems to point to a connection to one specific place on Earth: Egypt.
Something extraordinary happened when we started taking pictures of the surface of Mars. We saw what appeared to be pyramids on the surface of Mars. It's mind-blowing because these match the pyramids of ancient Egypt. Is there a connection between Mars and Egypt? Well, indeed there is. The city of Cairo was originally called Al-Qahira, which meant city of Mars, or the victorious. The Egyptians referred to the Sphinx as Ra Horakati, which means place of the horizon, which is the very same name that they gave to Mars. So there seems to be a deep embedded memory in ancient Egypt of a correspondence or a connection between Egyptian civilization and one that might have been on Mars.
If we are dealing with something extraterrestrial in origin, then the Egyptian connection is very telling, because many speculations about the extraterrestrial links with ancient Egypt.
But if there is a connection between the Cydonia region of Mars and ancient Egypt, what is the significance? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest further clues can be found by taking a closer look at the Badlands Guardian and the famous ruler it's thought to depict.
The Badlands Guardian is very similar to the statues of Akhenaten, the renegade Egyptian pharaoh. He and Nefertiti and their children all had elongated heads, as we see all around the world, and is often associated with extraterrestrials. When you put an image of the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten beside the image of the Badlands Guardian, they're virtually identical. When you do the A to B comparison, they both have this long neck, this very elongated face. And Akhenaten, of course, is the great mystic